I never wanted him, until the night my best friend's husband stepped too close before we begin. If you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. These real-life stories need your support to continue. And if this resonates with you, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who understands that life is complicated. Your engagement truly matters. Now, let's get into what happened that night. My name is Victoria, and at 48 years old, I believed I understood myself completely. 2 decades of marriage behind me, ended not in drama, but in the quiet realization that 2 people can grow in different directions until they're strangers sharing a house. 3 years divorced now, living alone in a condo downtown, rebuilding a life that felt peaceful, if not particularly exciting. I had my career in pharmaceutical sales, my circle of trusted friends, my yoga classes and book clubs, and all the things that fill the days of a woman in her late 40s who's done the hard work of figuring out who she is when she's not defined by being someone's wife. I thought I knew what I wanted and what I didn't want. Thought I'd moved past the chaos of unexpected feelings and inappropriate attractions. Thought at my age, with my experience, I was immune to the kind of confusion that comes from wanting something you absolutely should not want. I was wrong about all of it. Caroline Hayes had been my closest friend for 23 years. We met when we were both 25, new mothers struggling through sleepless nights and the complete identity crisis that comes with suddenly being responsible for another human life. Our daughters were born 6 weeks apart, and we bonded in those early years over shared exhaustion and the dark humor that's necessary to survive new motherhood. Over 2 decades, we'd been through everything together. Divorces, career changes, our kids growing up and leaving home, the strange experience of reaching middle age and realizing we'd somehow become the adults we used to think had everything figured out, only to discover that no one actually has anything figured out at all. Caroline was family in the way that matters more than blood, the person who knew my history and my secrets and loved me anyway, the friend I'd protected and who'd protected me through every hard thing life had thrown at us. Her husband Thomas was part of the landscape of that friendship. He'd been around for 18 years, married to Caroline for 16 of those. I'd been at their wedding, a small ceremony when Caroline was 40 and Thomas was 42, both of them entering marriage with more wisdom and less illusion than people who marry young. Thomas was an engineer, the kind of man who approached everything methodically and carefully, solid, dependable, exactly what Caroline needed after her first marriage to a man who'd been exciting, but ultimately irresponsible. Thomas was the opposite of exciting. He was steady, predictable, the kind of person who faded into the background of social gatherings, pleasant but forgettable. I'd been around Thomas hundreds of times over nearly 2 decades, and I could honestly say I'd never really looked at him, never thought about him beyond his role as Caroline's husband, never noticed what he looked like beyond the basics, never wondered what he thought about, never saw him as a person separate from his function in Caroline's life. He was invisible to me in the way that men often become invisible to women of a certain age, not because there's anything wrong with them, but because we've trained ourselves not to see, not to notice, not to let our attention wander to places it shouldn't go. And for 18 years, that invisibility had worked perfectly. Thomas existed in a category so separate from any romantic possibility that attraction was literally inconceivable, until it wasn't. Until one October evening when that carefully maintained invisibility shattered in a way I still don't fully understand. It happened at Caroline's house, a casual dinner party she'd organized for 6 close friends. Nothing unusual about the evening itself. Good food, better wine, the kind of comfortable conversation that happens among people who've known each other for decades and don't need to perform or impress. Caroline's house was warm and welcoming as always, filled with the evidence of a life well lived, photos of their kids, art from various trips, the comfortable furniture of people who've settled into themselves. I'd been there 1,000 times. It felt as familiar as my own home. The evening progressed normally. Dinner, dessert, more wine, the kind of easy laughter that comes from long friendship. Around 10, people started making noises about leaving. 2 of our friends had early mornings, needed to get home to relieve babysitters. Caroline walked them to the door, getting caught up in extended goodbyes the way she always did, unable to let people leave without one more story, one more hug, one more moment of connection. I stayed behind in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher because that's what I always did. Caroline cooked. I cleaned. It was our rhythm, established over decades of dinners at each other's homes. Thomas came into the kitchen carrying the last of the wine glasses from the dining room. We'd been alone together before, obviously. Countless times over 18 years. Brief moments while Caroline was in another room or running an errand. But we'd never really talked. Never engaged in anything beyond polite small talk about weather and traffic and other meaningless topics. We existed in the same space without truly occupying it together. But that night felt different from the moment he walked into the kitchen. The air felt heavier. Or maybe I was just more aware of it than usual. Thomas set the glasses on the counter near where I was working, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something woody and subtle that I'd probably been smelling for years without ever consciously registering. But that night, I noticed. Noticed in a way that made me pause. Made me suddenly aware that I was alone in a kitchen with a man who wasn't my husband, who was someone's husband, but not in a way that had ever mattered to me before. I shook off the feeling, told myself I was being ridiculous, kept loading the dishwasher while Thomas rinsed glasses at the sink beside me. We were maybe 2 feet apart, both performing simple domestic tasks, nothing remotely significant happening, except something was happening. I could feel it in the way my skin seemed suddenly more sensitive, the way I was hyper-aware of where Thomas was in the space, the way the kitchen that had always felt comfortably sized now felt too small, too intimate. Thomas said something about the evening, how nice it had been to have everyone together. His voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Lower, softer, more present somehow, like he was really talking to me instead of just filling silence with polite noise. I responded with something equally bland, something about Caroline being a wonderful host, but I didn't sound like myself either. My voice came out shakier than it should have, betraying nervousness I had no reason to feel. Thomas turned off the water, dried his hands on a dish towel, and then he did something that changed everything. He stepped closer. Not dramatically, not in a way that would have looked inappropriate if someone had walked in. Just one small step that closed the distance between us from 2 feet to maybe 6 inches. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough that I had to tilt my head slightly to look up at him because he was taller than I'd ever registered. Close enough that the air between us felt charged with something I couldn't name, but definitely felt. And he looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in 18 years, Thomas looked at me like I was a person he was seeing. Not just Caroline's friend Victoria, not just a woman who happened to be in his kitchen, but me, specifically me, with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. I should have stepped back, should have broken the moment by saying something cheerful or moving away or doing anything to diffuse whatever was building between us. But I didn't move, couldn't move, just stood there frozen while Thomas looked at me with eyes that I was seeing for the first time were actually quite beautiful. A warm brown with flecks of gold that I'd never noticed because I'd trained myself not to notice, not to see him as anything other than invisible. And in that moment of really seeing each other, something fundamental shifted. The air between us became heavy with possibility, with tension, with an awareness that hadn't existed seconds before, but now felt undeniable. Thomas didn't touch me, didn't say anything inappropriate, didn't actually cross any line that could be named or called out, but he didn't need to. The step closer was enough. The look was enough. The sudden intensity between us was enough to crack something open inside me that I'd kept carefully sealed for years. I felt my heart racing, actually racing like I was a teenager instead of a 48-year-old woman who should know better. Felt my breath coming faster, shallower. Felt heat spreading through my body in a way that was unmistakable and completely inappropriate. And most terrifying of all, I felt something inside me respond to his proximity. Some part of me that had been dormant for so long I'd forgotten it existed. Some part that wanted, that needed, that recognized something in Thomas I'd never allowed myself to see. The moment lasted maybe 10 seconds, maybe less, but in those seconds, 18 years of careful invisibility shattered. I saw Thomas, really saw him. Saw that he wasn't just Caroline's steady, predictable husband, that he was a man with depth and complexity I'd never bothered to notice. that his steadiness might actually be strength rather than blandness, that his quietness might be thoughtfulness rather than dullness, that the body I'd never looked at was actually quite attractive in a mature, solid way that appealed to me more than I wanted to acknowledge. And worse, far worse, I saw that Thomas was looking at me the same way, with recognition, with awareness, with something that looked dangerously like reciprocal interest, like whatever was happening to me was happening to him too, like the invisibility had shattered for both of us simultaneously. Then Caroline's voice carried from the front hallway. She was still saying goodbye to our friends, her warm laugh filling the house the way it always did, and the spell broke. Thomas stepped back, putting appropriate distance between us, picked up his wine glass like nothing had happened, like we'd just been two people cleaning up after a dinner party. Nothing more. I turned back to the dishwasher with shaking hands, forcing myself to focus on loading plates and forks and trying to slow my racing heart. By the time Caroline came back into the kitchen a minute later, we looked completely normal. Nothing to see. Nothing suspicious. Just her friend and her husband, both exactly where they should be, doing exactly what they should be doing. And Caroline suspected nothing. Why would she? In 18 years, neither Thomas nor I had ever given her reason to doubt, had never flirted or exchanged inappropriate looks or created any situation that would make her uncomfortable. We'd been perfectly appropriate because there'd been nothing to be inappropriate about, until there was, until one step and one look changed everything. I left soon after, claiming tiredness, early morning commitments, hugged Caroline goodbye, waved to Thomas from across the room without making eye contact, drove home in a daze, my whole body still humming with an awareness that had appeared out of nowhere and showed no signs of fading. That was 4 months ago. 4 months of trying to pretend that moment didn't happen. 4 months of avoiding situations where I might be alone with Thomas. 4 months of group dinners where I'm careful to sit as far from him as possible, careful never to let our eyes meet for more than a second, careful to maintain the invisibility that had protected us both for so long. But it's too late. The invisibility is gone. I can't unsee Thomas now. Can't go back to not noticing him. Every time I'm at Caroline's house, I'm hyper-aware of where Thomas is in the room. I notice what he's wearing. I notice when he laughs. I notice the way he moves, the way he speaks. All the things I'd managed not to notice for 18 years. And worse, I notice when he's noticing me. Because he is noticing me now, in ways he never did before. Ways that are subtle enough to escape Caroline's attention, but obvious enough that I can feel his awareness like a physical touch. Nothing has happened. That's what I keep telling myself. One moment of standing too close in a kitchen is not an affair. Is not even really inappropriate by any standard I can name. No one touched. No one said anything wrong. It was just proximity and eye contact, and a feeling that existed entirely in my head. But it doesn't feel like nothing. It feels like everything changed in those 10 seconds. Like a door opened that I can't figure out how to close. Like I discovered something about myself I wasn't prepared to discover at 48 years old. The discovery is this: I'm not done wanting, not done feeling, not done being capable of attraction that comes out of nowhere and scrambles everything I thought I understood about myself and my boundaries. At 48, after years of marriage and divorce and rebuilding and finding peace, I thought I'd moved past this, thought I'd reached a stage of life where attraction was manageable, where I could control what I felt and who I felt it for, where inappropriate feelings could be neatly filed away under "not going to pursue this" and forgotten. But that's not how it works. Attraction doesn't care about your age or your wisdom or your carefully constructed boundaries. Doesn't care that the object of attraction is your best friend's husband. Doesn't care that acting on it would destroy the most important friendship in your life. Attraction just exists, undeniable and consuming, whether you want it to or not. And I don't want it. That's what makes this so unbearable. I genuinely don't want to feel this way about Thomas. Don't want the complication or the guilt or the constant awareness that makes every interaction with Caroline feel like a betrayal. Don't want to be the kind of woman who looks at her friend's husband and feels things she shouldn't feel. But wanting not to feel something doesn't make it go away. I've tried everything to kill this unwanted attraction. Thrown myself into work, into hobbies, into dating apps where I've had awkward coffee meetings with age-appropriate men who are perfectly nice and completely failed to make me feel a fraction of what I felt during those 10 seconds in Caroline's kitchen. I've tried therapy, tried journaling, tried every self-help technique for managing unwanted feelings. Nothing works, because this isn't just about attraction, it's about recognition. In that moment when Thomas stepped close, when he really looked at me, I felt seen in a way I haven't felt in years. Seen as a woman rather than as someone's friend or someone's ex-wife or someone's mother. Seen as desirable, as interesting, as worthy of attention from a man I'd never even considered. And that feeling of being seen, really seen, is addictive in ways I'm only beginning to understand. At 48, I've spent years becoming invisible. Not intentionally, but it happens. Society stops seeing women of a certain age the way it sees younger women. We fade into the background, become asexual beings, defined by our roles rather than our desires. I'd accepted that invisibility, had even been grateful for it because it meant I could move through the world without the complications of unwanted male attention. But in becoming invisible to the world, I'd also become invisible to myself. Stopped thinking of myself as a woman with needs and desires. Stopped imagining that anyone would look at me and feel attraction. Stopped believing I was capable of inspiring that kind of intensity in another person. Thomas's look in that kitchen woke me up to something I'd let die. The knowledge that I'm still here. Still a woman with desires and needs. Still capable of being seen as attractive, as interesting, as someone worth stepping closer to. And once you wake up to that, once you remember you're still fully alive in ways you'd forgotten, you can't go back to sleep. Can't return to the comfortable invisibility that protected you from feeling too much. So I'm stuck. Carrying this attraction I never wanted and don't know what to do with. Knowing that Thomas feels something too, even if we've never acknowledged it. Never spoken about that moment. Never been alone together since because we're both smart enough to know that being alone would be dangerous. Would open possibilities that need to stay closed. Caroline remains completely oblivious. She still talks about Thomas the way she always has, mentions him casually in conversation, invites me to their house, trusts me completely because I've given her no reason in 23 years to doubt that trust. And that trust is what kills me. Because even though nothing has happened, even though it was just one moment of standing too close, I know I'm betraying her every time I see Thomas and feel that pull. Every time I notice him in ways I shouldn't notice. Every time I replay that kitchen moment in my mind when I'm lying alone in bed at night. That's betrayal. Maybe not legally, not in any way that would hold up if we were characters in a divorce court, but emotionally, spiritually, in every way that matters to female friendship, I'm betraying the woman who's been my sister for over 2 decades. And I hate myself for it. Hate that at 48, with all my experience and supposed wisdom, I can't seem to control what I feel. Can't logic my way out of an attraction that makes no sense and serves no purpose except to complicate my life and threaten my most important relationship. I've considered telling Caroline, sitting her down and confessing everything. The moment in the kitchen, the unwanted attraction, the way I can't stop noticing Thomas now even though I desperately want to. Maybe honesty would be better than carrying this secret. Maybe confessing would relieve the guilt and let Caroline decide how to handle it. But I can't do it. Can't find the words to explain that her husband stepped close to me once, and it changed everything. Can't figure out how to confess attraction without it sounding like more than it is. Can't bear the thought of hurting her or making her doubt her marriage over something that exists primarily in my head. So I carry it. This unwanted attraction. This burden of awareness. This guilt that colors every interaction with my best friend. I show up at dinners and birthday parties and all the normal rhythms of our friendship, and I pretend. Pretend I'm the same Victoria I've always been. Pretend nothing changed. Pretend I don't notice when Thomas enters a room, or when his eyes meet mine for a fraction of a second before we both look away. The pretending is exhausting. At an age when I should be past this kind of drama, past the chaos of unwanted feelings and complicated attractions, I'm drowning in exactly the kind of situation I thought I'd left behind with my youth. And the worst part is that I don't even know what I want. Don't know if I actually want Thomas or if I just want the feeling he gave me. The feeling of being seen, of being desirable, of being a woman with power and presence instead of someone who's faded into middle-aged invisibility. Maybe this isn't really about Thomas at all. Maybe he was just the person who happened to be there, who happened to step close at a moment when I was vulnerable to feeling something. Maybe any man who looked at me with that kind of intensity would have had the same effect. Or maybe not. Maybe there's something specific about Thomas that reached me in ways no one else could. Something about his steadiness that I need after years of instability. Something about his quiet strength that appeals to me more than the exciting but ultimately unreliable men I've been attracted to in the past. Something about him specifically that woke me up in ways I can't explain and can't replicate with anyone else. I honestly don't know. And at 48, not knowing feels like failure. Like I should have myself figured out by now. Should understand my desires and motivations. Should be past the age where one moment of proximity can scramble my entire understanding of myself. But here I am, 4 months past that October evening, still carrying this unwanted attraction. Still hyper-aware of Thomas every time we're in the same room. Still lying awake some nights replaying those 10 seconds when he stepped close and looked at me, and everything changed. Still hating myself for betraying Caroline with feelings I can't control. Still wondering if Thomas thinks about it too, or if it was just me. If that moment meant something to him, or if I've built an entire crisis out of nothing. I'll never know, because we can't talk about it. Can't acknowledge what happened or didn't happen. Can't explore whether there's actually something there, or if it was just a moment of mutual recognition that meant nothing beyond those few seconds. We exist in this strange space of awareness and avoidance, both knowing something shifted, neither willing to name it or examine it or give it power by speaking it out loud. And meanwhile, Caroline plans a vacation for the 3 of us, a week at a beach house next summer. Just Caroline and Thomas and me, the way we've done several times over the years. Casual vacations among old friends. Nothing unusual about the plan, except the thought of being in a beach house with Thomas for a week makes my heart race with something that's equal parts anticipation and dread. How do I spend a week in close proximity to someone I'm trying desperately not to notice? How do I maintain the pretense that nothing changed when every moment will be charged with the awareness that something definitely changed? How do I protect my friendship with Caroline while also protecting myself from feelings I don't know how to manage? I don't have answers to any of those questions. Don't have a neat resolution or a clear path forward. Don't have any wisdom to offer beyond this. Attraction can happen at any age, to anyone, regardless of how much you don't want it, how inappropriate it is, how much it complicates your carefully constructed life. And sometimes that attraction comes from the most unexpected source, from a man you've known for 18 years without ever really seeing, from one small step closer in a kitchen, from a look that lasted 10 seconds but changed everything. I never wanted him. That's the truth I keep coming back to. Never looked at Thomas and felt desire before that October evening. Never fantasized about him, or wondered what if, or felt anything beyond mild appreciation that he made my best friend happy. But now I can't stop seeing him. Can't return to the blessed invisibility that protected us both for nearly 2 decades. Can't unsee what was revealed in that brief moment of proximity. And I don't know if that makes me weak or human. Don't know if I should be ashamed of feelings I can't control, or if I should be proud that at 48, I'm still capable of feeling so intensely. Don't know if this attraction will fade with time, or if it will always be there now. A low hum of awareness whenever Thomas is near. All I know is that it happened. That one night my best friend's husband stepped too close and woke something in me I didn't know was sleeping. And now I have to figure out how to live with that awakening. How to be Caroline's friend while carrying this secret. How to be in the same room with Thomas without anyone noticing the tension that's obvious to me but apparently invisible to everyone else. How to rebuild the boundaries that shattered in those 10 seconds. Or whether boundaries can even be rebuilt once they've been crossed in your mind if not in reality. These are questions I'm still wrestling with. Questions that don't have easy answers at any age but feel particularly complicated at 48, when you're supposed to be past this kind of confusion, when you're supposed to have yourself figured out, when you're supposed to be wise enough to control what you feel. I'm learning that wisdom doesn't protect you from attraction. Experience doesn't prevent you from wanting things you shouldn't want. Age doesn't make you immune to the kind of moment that changes everything. It just makes you more aware of the stakes, more conscious of what you stand to lose, more determined to protect the people you love even when it means suppressing parts of yourself. That's where I am now, trying to protect Caroline, trying to preserve our friendship, trying to pretend that nothing changed even though everything did, and hoping that eventually, maybe, the intensity will fade, the awareness will dim, the attraction will burn itself out through sheer force of will and lack of fuel. But 4 months in, it shows no signs of fading. The memory of that October evening is as vivid now as it was the next day. The awareness of Thomas is as sharp. The guilt is as persistent. And I'm beginning to accept that this might be something I carry forever. That some moments change you in ways you can't undo. That some attractions don't fade just because you want them to. That at 48, you can still discover new truths about yourself that complicate everything you thought you knew. My best friend's husband stepped too close, and nothing's been the same since. This end